Of Natalee Holloway finally getting the answers they say they've longed for 18 years after that Alabama teen went missing in Aruba.
For 2 decades, the family of Natalee Holloway have suffered an excruciating emotional pain because of her passing. The prime suspect never admitted what he's accused of until long years of secrecy and cold-blood denial. However relieving his confession is, it's still not enough to bring back Natalee, a beloved daughter and a great friend. What could be worse than having the knowledge of how your child was brutally murdered? Now that everything's solved, join us as we uncover every piece of Natalee's case. Justice, finally. If you were around in the early 2000s, you probably remember Natalee Holloway's face. Her smile was on every news channel, her name in every headline. She was 18, just graduated from high school in Alabama, and on what was supposed to be a celebratory trip to Aruba with her classmates in May 2005. But what started as a sunny getaway turned into a nightmare, one that would haunt her family and captivate the public for the next 2 decades. For years, no one knew exactly what happened. There were rumors, suspects, dead ends, and countless media specials. Everyone had a theory. The case seemed frozen in time, a heartbreaking question mark that refused to be answered. At the center of that mystery was one man, Joran van der Sloot. He was the last person seen with Natalee, and he quickly became the prime suspect. But without a body or concrete evidence, nothing stuck. Fast forward to 2023, and suddenly, everything changed. Almost out of nowhere, in a quiet courtroom in Birmingham, Alabama, the truth finally came out, and it was even darker than most imagined. As part of a plea deal for unrelated extortion charges, Joran finally confessed. Not just to knowing what happened, but to killing her. According to his confession, he tried to make sexual advances toward Natalee on the beach. She rejected him, and he beat her to death with a cinder block, then pushed her body into the sea. Just like that. No drama, no mystery. Just raw, awful truth. For Natalee's mom, Beth Holloway, the moment was as surreal as it was shattering. She had spent 18 years looking for answers, chasing leads that led nowhere, hoping for a breakthrough. And here it was, at last, not from justice in Aruba, not from new evidence, but from the mouth of the man who had tormented her all these years. "It's over," she said. "Joran van der Sloot is no longer a suspect. He is the killer." There was a certain strength in her voice, but you could still hear the ache behind it. Closure is a tricky thing. Sometimes it brings peace, sometimes it reopens wounds. And if you're wondering why he was in court in Alabama at all, here's the wild part. It wasn't because of Natalee's murder. It was because in 2010, Joran tried to extort Beth Holloway for $250,000, offering to reveal where Natalee's body was in exchange for the cash. She gave him a down payment, and he gave her lies. That's what finally got him extradited from Peru, where he was already serving a 28-year sentence for murdering another woman, Stephanie Flores, in 2010. Turns out, he didn't just stop with Natalee. The confession. From the very beginning, Van der Sloot played a central role in the mystery surrounding Holloway's disappearance. He was the last known person to be with Natalee on the night of May 30, 2005, when the 18-year-old Alabama high school graduate vanished during a trip to Aruba. Almost immediately, his statements to police began to shift. Initially, he claimed that he and 2 friends had dropped Natalee off at her hotel. Then he changed the story, saying he left her on the beach. The inconsistencies in his accounts ignited public outrage and suspicion, but despite extensive searches and interrogations, no conclusive evidence emerged. Over the following years, Van der Sloot continued to insert himself into the public eye, often offering sensational but unverifiable information about what happened that night. In 2008, Dutch crime reporter Peter R. de Vries secretly recorded Van der Sloot appearing to admit to being present when Natalee died and disposing of her body. Yet when confronted, he dismissed the recording as a fabrication, a lie told to gain the trust of a supposed substance dealer. This became a pattern. Van der Sloot would make confessions, only to retract them, claiming they were falsehoods meant to trick, mislead, or capitalize on media attention. His motivations became increasingly suspect. In 2010, Van der Sloot attempted to extort Natalee's mother, Beth Holloway, offering to reveal the location of Natalee's remains in exchange. After receiving a partial payment, he led her attorney to a house that turned out to be a false lead. This act finally led to federal charges in the US for extortion and wire fraud, further painting Van der Sloot not only as a manipulative figure but as someone willing to commodify a mother's grief. The turning point came in 2023, nearly 20 years after Holloway's disappearance, when Van der Sloot, facing extradition and charges in the US, delivered a confession that law enforcement described as credible and detailed. In his statement, he admitted that he had tried to sexually assault Natalee, and when she resisted, he became violent, striking her in the head with a cinder block and disposing of her body. This confession, unlike his previous ones, was part of a formal plea deal, making it legally binding and admissible. It marked the first time Van der Sloot offered a narrative with enough corroborative detail to be deemed truthful by authorities. This final confession not only confirmed what many had suspected for years but also exposed Van der Sloot's manipulative tendencies in stark relief. He had toyed with the truth for nearly 2 decades, dragging a grieving family through a labyrinth of lies. The nature of his confession, cold, emotionless, and lacking remorse, offered insight into a deeply disturbed individual whose need for control and attention often overpowered his willingness to tell the truth. It wasn't just a revelation of guilt, it was the culmination of a long campaign of psychological warfare. Joran van der Sloot's confession in the Natalee Holloway case is less a moment of justice than it is a bitter confirmation. It closes a chapter but offers little solace, as it underscores how long he withheld the truth and the pain he inflicted in the interim. The story is not just about a crime, it's about the manipulation of truth, the weaponization of uncertainty, and the eventual, belated exposure of a killer's conscience, long buried under layers of deceit. It was a long way till they got into the suspect's confession. Did you know there were multiple names involved besides Joran? On June 5, Aruban authorities arrested 2 former security guards, Nick John and Abraham Jones, on suspicion of kidnapping and murdering Natalee Holloway. Both men had previously worked at the Allegro Hotel, which was closed for renovations at the time. Although officials never publicly explained the reason for their arrests, media reports suggested that statements made by Joran van der Sloot and the Kalpoe brothers may have influenced the decision. Additionally, it was reported that John and Jones were known to frequent hotel areas to meet women, and one had a prior encounter with the law. The 2 were held for over a week but released on June 13 without being charged. Just days later, on June 9, police arrested Joran van der Sloot and brothers Deepak and Satish Kalpoe on suspicion of kidnapping and murder. Under Aruban law, authorities can arrest someone based on a strong suspicion but must continue to justify the detention with increasing evidence during judicial reviews. Deputy Police Chief Gerold Dompig later stated that these 3 had been the main focus of the investigation from early on. Police surveillance, phone tapping, and email monitoring began within 3 days of Holloway being reported missing. However, Dompig also noted that pressure from Holloway's family prompted authorities to act sooner than planned and arrest the suspects before gathering more evidence. On June 11, David Cruz, spokesperson for the Aruban Minister of Justice, incorrectly announced that Natalee was dead and that authorities knew where her body was. He later retracted this statement, claiming he had been misinformed. That same evening, Dompig told the Associated Press that one of the suspects had admitted that something bad happened to Natalee after they took her to the beach, and that police were being led to the scene. The following day, prosecution officials neither confirmed nor denied this claim, only stating that the investigation had reached a critical phase. On June 17, a sixth person, local disc jockey Steve Gregory Crows, was arrested after being implicated by one of the original suspects. Then, on June 22, Joran's father, Paulus van der Sloot, was detained for questioning and briefly arrested. Both Crows and Paulus were released on June 26. Throughout this time, the stories told by the suspects shifted multiple times.